Hey everybody, it's Jeremy from jeremy.net. I am a comic book artist, writer, creator, self-publisher. I share my creative process here with you online. If you enjoy these live streams, would like to get additional bonus live streams twice a month, you can become a Patreon subscriber for as little as $2 a month. Head on over to patreon.com/Jeremy. It's patreon.com/GERIMI. If you'd like to get a free digital sketchbook, work in progress animated GIFs delivered right to your inbox, blog posts about what I'm reading, what I'm watching, what's inspiring me creatively, sign up for my free monthly newsletter at substack.com/@Jeremy. And if you'd like to purchase physical copies of my comic books, or if you read digitally on Kindle, you can go to amazon.jeremy.net. They'll forward you to my Amazon author page. And I apologize for starting late today. Let's see. I see Philip in the chat says, hola, hola, Philip. Good to see you. So I am out of my normal studio setup. And in fact, I am going to be doing something a little bit different today because I don't have my normal additional cameras. So I'm just going to be using my handy dandy phone, which, by the way, if you want to get one of these cool ass Jeremy illustrated phone cases, you can get those on my store, jeremy.net. But anyway, I am just going to be working on some sketch cards. But before I get to actually working on the cards themselves, I'm not happy with any of the images that I have going on so far. So I'm just going to doodle a little bit in my sketchbook. And this is a sketchbook that my wife got me on a trip to Florence, Italy. So you can see it's got all the Leonardo da Vinci illustrations and his little Italian script written in there. It's a very beautiful sketchbook. It was a nice gift that she got me while we were traveling. So this particular sketchbook has a lot of sentimental value. Anyway, let's see. So all we have in here are just some doodles that I had started. I do not have, and by the way, I apologize. This entire live stream is going to be shaky camera work because I'm going to be holding my phone while I draw as opposed to having the normal clamps and stands that I have to hold everything when I'm usually working. So I apologize in advance. It's gonna suck. I don't have any way around it. I've tried to figure out what else I can attach this to while I'm working at my table, and there's no real good way for me to set that up. So I am just gonna get in here, get my pencil, and so as I was saying, my sketchbooks generally are not nice, neat, beautiful sketchbooks. Like we see a lot of artists that post finished works of art in their sketchbook that really just need to be, I don't know, scanned in and then digitally colored or inked or made into a final print. My sketchbooks are like thought journals. Like you'll see me doing, I did a Batman sketch card layout, and it's just me doodling different compositions, different head positions, different thoughts and images. And I think there's even another page with a few other ones. And it's really just more of space for me to work through my creative process, work out ideas. So don't expect any beautiful masterpieces here. This is a working sketchbook. So one of the things that I had on my list to do was an image of Storm from the X-Men. And I'm just not happy with this. Like, it's just a simple headshot, but I want it to feel a little bit more like it needs some sort of framing element to give it, I don't know, just a better feel. And before I do this, I'm going to see if I can clamp. Hang on. I need to grab a clamp behind me. It's a clamp that I was attempting to use for trying to find a way to hold my sketchbook, but instead, for attempting, it's a clamp that I was using to attempt to hold my my phone. And I know there's devices I can get to hold it. I'm going to get one of those right after this. I have devices to hold my phone, just none of them are in this studio. But Instead, I'm going to use this to try and keep the sketchboard stable while I work. Now, Philip asks, he says, what good drawings? I hope you can achieve much more and be more recognized. Thank you, Philip. That's a very kind thing for you to say. I personally have the feeling like I always feel like I have many, many more years of drawing and learning to go. Um, no artist is as bad as they are fear they are, but they're never as good as they would hope to be. So I try to, I'm always grateful for everyone who says kind things about my work, but I look at how many amazing and talented comic book artists there are in the world, and I just think to myself, well, I have to keep working. I have to keep studying. I have to keep learning and growing. But I appreciate your kind words, so thank you. So now that I have a chance to look a little bit clearer and start doodling, the very first thing I'm thinking about Storm, and I'm trying to decide whether I want to do Headdress Storm or Mohawk Storm. I really like Mohawk Storm. Let's see. And I need to pull up an image of her. Hang on. I need to pull up an image of her classic headdress. Here we go. Now the challenge is having this up to look at while I've also got, I realized I can just pull this window, this tab over to the side. I want to have it on the screen, but still be able to see any comments while I'm working. So I need to just pull this over. There we go. The first thing that I'm thinking as I'm looking at this is that because I have her in kind of a down shot, or not necessarily a down shot, but with her head looking down, the first thing I'm thinking is that it doesn't feel as regal as Storm should. And this is kind of like before I even get into who the character is, I'm thinking about, well, what am I trying to say with them, or what is their attitude? And if I want Storm to feel regal, I actually want to do it with her head tilted up. So this might be too far up and a little bit kind of haughty. And I say haughty, H-O. I forget how to spell the British haughty, but kind of like snotty attitude. This might be a little too high. But just figuring out the angle for the attitude that the character should have is a big difference. Now let's say that I've got her hair, and I've got storm clouds framing her. So let's say all of this is going to be storm clouds. The image that I'm looking at right now for reference is an Arthur Adams cover from Classic X-Men number 3. So I'm using that image for costume reference. And then just in terms of work out the pose, Let's see here. Philip says, sorry, I have to leave, but I hope you have a nice Sunday. Well, no problem, Philip. Thank you for stopping by. And if you're not subscribed, please subscribe to the channel. And hopefully I will see you on my next live stream. I noticed that just the fact that I ended up starting, like an hour later this week, it definitely changes things when people are expecting me week in, week out at the same time, and I change that up. This isn't permanently going to be starting at noon. This is just one of those weeks where my schedule is funky, and I really thought, well, I don't know for sure if I'll be able to live stream next week at all. So I thought, let me just hop on and draw for a little while with you guys. And I'll actually tell you, sitting here and just getting back to drawing table, sketchbook, and camera, other than the fact that I don't have a stable stand to hold my camera, this feels very, back to basics in a way. Because before, when I first started live streaming, it's been over a decade now. And it was after I had finished my first graphic novel in 2009. And I knew that I wanted to, I know that it takes me many years to finish a graphic novel, and it takes me many months to finish a single issue. And hey, Chris is in the chat. Good to see you, Chris. Thanks for dropping in. I started at noon instead of 11 today, my time. So my schedule is a little off. It's a little wonky. But so I just got started a little while ago. And these are just thumbnails for a Storm sketch card. I had started drawing her, and it felt like kind of a blah, kind of bland, not great pose. There's something just off about it. So I'm trying to work out both the pose, and now that I have a pose that I'm happy with, I'm trying to work out some compositional ideas. In fact, let me... I'm going to save this image that I'm using. This is very hard to do with just one hand and not having a mouse to right click with. I want to go back and look at some Dave Cockrum Storm because I'm trying to go back to the source. Yeah, I really like Dave Cockrum's Storm. Sometimes the originals are the best. All right. Let's see if I can find a good headshot. All right. So I guess at this point, what I'm trying to do now let me just move my reference I'm looking at sort of out of the way so I can see what I'm doing here. All right. Um, so, I mean, I've got a pose that I like, but what I want more than that now is actual. I'll come back to this image. What I want is to sort of get in and try to create a tiny bit of a composition. Now, you can't really do too much with a sketch card. It's a very small image. What I want is to just have it frame the figure in a way that it feels like an actual portrait. I see HJ is in the chat. He's all good to see you. Good to see you too, HJ. Again, I mentioned this at the top of the stream, but I don't have my normal setup, so I'm just holding my phone and sketching. So we're going old school here. So what I'm going to try and do now is sort of work from the outside of the frame in. And what I mean by that is, okay, I'm going to start with their storm clouds. And maybe I'll have, sorry about that. In fact, let me just go zoom in. As long as I'm doing it like this, that you guys really see what's going on here. So I'm trying to think compositionally before I even get to the character's portrait. What do what's going to be the real focal points? In the same way that you might have radiating lines pointing into the character, I'm having storm clouds with lightning bolts focusing down towards where I plan to put her head. And HJ asks in the chat, are you planning to watch the Oscars later? And my answer is no. I'm not a big awards show guy. In fact, I don't even really watch as many movies as I used to. I still enjoy movies, but I find that it's hard for me to carve out the time to sit down and watch a whole movie. And when my wife are relaxing at the end of the day, we'll tend to watch more of just TV, something that's bite-sized, where we can watch for an hour instead of just moving immediately into a 90-minute experience. I do want to see The Brutalist because I've heard very great things about that film. That sounds very interesting to me. Oddly enough, I really enjoyed. I had the opportunity to see Wicked when it was playing in Los Angeles at the Pantages Theater, and I really enjoyed it. That said, on one hand, I'm not super excited to see Wicked. I enjoyed it. I thought it was a great musical. But on the other hand, I think Cynthia Erivo is amazing. I've thought she's awesome in everything I've seen her in. So it's really going to come down to just time-wise. Is there a time where it's good for us to watch it? And if so, then maybe I'm more interested in watching the films that have been nominated than I am watching the award show itself. And as it stands right now, I'm trying to think of what I have seen that has actually been nominated, whether for Best Picture, Best Director, Best Screenplay. There's a lot of stuff that I haven't seen yet. So I presume, HJ, by the fact that you're asking, that you are going to watch the Oscars and you are excited for it. So I don't mean it to answer your question in a way that I'm poo-pooing the Oscars. It's just, I haven't even had a chance to watch the nominated films yet, so I'm not that worried about the award show. Let me see here. I'm just flipping back to the reference that I'm looking at. Just to show you, it's a little weird because I'll actually show you on the camera here so you can see sort of the infinite loop where on one hand I've got the streaming window that I look through, and the other side I've got little bits of like storm reference images that I'm looking at. So I kind of keep flipping back and forth between this and that. Let's see here. So HJ, are there any movies that are nominated that you have seen already? Movies that you enjoyed, movies that you're excited about? Let's see here. So HJ says, I can definitely see where you're coming from. So The Brutalist might not be a good one to watch if you're worried about time, though, because it's over 3.5 hours. Yeah, and I heard that I think they actually have an intermission in it. And he says, I've seen a fair few of the films at the Oscars this year, but I'm rooting for Anora the most for sure. It's a really special film, that and The Substance. Okay, The Substance is definitely on both my wife and I's list. That's one that, a big problem for us is finding movies that we both want to watch because, she'll watch a good drama, but she does not necessarily lean into a lot of darker material. She tends to prefer comedies and upbeat stories. Whereas, I like horror, I like fantasy, I like sci-fi, I like crime. I'm kind of all over the map. I think she would probably have zero interest in The Brutalist just from, knowing what it's about. But the other thing is that I am also somebody who I can watch a film the way you would watch a television miniseries. So I am perfectly fine with putting on a film, watching 45 minutes of it, hitting pause, coming back, and then looking at it, the next day, just watching it in 45-minute chunks, the way you would watch a miniseries. I'm sure that probably would infuriate some directors to know that people are consuming their work in such a piecemeal manner. But, oh, hey, Arrow's set in the chat. Huzzah! I caught you live. This is also very suspicious since I was legitimately watching your old live on thumbnails. Hi, everyone. Well, you know what? Thank you for watching, and I'm glad you were able to catch me. Yeah, I'm starting later than I usually do. And as you can tell by the shaky ass camera work, I don't have my normal setup. So I'm doing little thumbnails for a Storm sketch card here and just trying to find an angle, a pose, and a composition that really works for me. But I'm glad that you are able to watch live. Please, by all means, if you have any questions or comments while I'm drawing, feel free to toss them in there. And by the way, I do check the comments on my videos regularly, and although sometimes I miss them, if you ever see a video and you're like, wow, I wish I was part of this conversation, if it's an old live stream, feel free to leave a comment on the video, even if it's old, because I do see those and I try to respond. And sometimes I'm able to respond to them, and people just see the reply. Sometimes people will ask questions that will make me say, oh, I should talk about this on another live stream. So you may inspire a whole topic for a future live stream. So I am happier with this composition that I just sketched out. However, trying to figure out how far I want her hair to frame the image is probably the thing that I'm sort of struggling with. Let's see here. So Arrowset says, in the video I was just watching, you mentioned how you were getting sucked into just doing thumbnails versus doing finished pieces. How's that going for you? She asked as I draw thumbnails. Yeah, well, normally my problem is I'm a perfectionist, and I'll draw one version of something and I'm not happy with it. I draw another version of something and I'm not happy with it. What I do is I try to fix all the problems in the thumbnails, because there are definitely artists who get bored with working out all of the details in their preliminary stage, and they feel like when they're doing a finished piece that is very mechanical. Kind of in the same way that a lot of writers do not enjoy outlining, because they feel like they've already told the whole story. And then when it comes to the actual draft, they just, they're like, I'm just placing words in order. It's very mechanical. I am quite the opposite, where once I get all of the thought work down, once I figure out where I want the major shapes, the composition to be, the angles of the head, the look of the character's eyes, I'll work out all those little details. And then when it comes to doing a finished piece, like I've got some very simple ones like that I'm working on, like, this sketch card that I did this a couple weeks ago. And it's a very simple, straightforward Batman. But even just for deciding that this is what I wanted to do, I went through and, well, crap. Now the problem is if I want to look at some of the other pages, I've got to undo the clamp. Point being, there's a few different iterations of this card that are in the pages right before here on the sketchbook. And when I sit down to do a finished piece after all the thumbnails, it's extremely relaxing. It's extremely relaxing for me. I turn off my brain and I just, it's like going into the flow state when I'm actually just doing the mechanical act of rendering and finishing off the pose. I guess it's like when a runner is running and they get that runner's high. Once they get past the point where they are tired and exhausted and they're just in the zone, for me, working out the details is, that process. So I guess the real challenge I have is knowing when to just stop with, when enough is enough with the thumbnails. Just say, all right, I am there, and I need to trust myself that I can bring this drawing in for a landing, and go for it. And just anything that isn't already thought out, to simply accept that I'll be able to work out something on the page. And let's see here. Yeah, Arrowset says, ha ha ha, exactly. I noticed you were doing thumbnails, LOL. And HJ says, that Batman looks so good. Thank you. I really appreciate that. Arrowset also says, oh, great analogy with the writing. I'm a writer learning to draw, so I can do comics. I understand the sense of outlining means a loss of flow and mystery. And Arrowset also says hi to HJ. And it's very interesting to me because I come from the exact opposite direction, in that I'm somebody who's been drawing all of my life. And I was like, oh, I love comics. It took me 3 graphic novels before I'm like, oh, wow, I really need to do a deep dive into the craft of writing and put as much time into studying writing as I have into studying artwork. And that's one of the reasons why I am a huge outliner, is because I've tried to make my learning of the writing process mimic the learning process I've had as an artist. And generally speaking, with artists, with a writer, a lot of writers that are discovery writers will just start with, whatever scene they have, or just start with the character, say, well, what is my character doing today? And they just follow the character wherever they go. And, eventually a structure forms, characters form, antagonist, protagonist form, and eventually coalesces into something that is interesting, a climax that they find powerful. And then when they're done, they'll go back, they'll edit, They'll restructure, they'll move scenes, add characters, delete characters, and shape it into something finished. And that makes a lot of sense for a writing aspect. Now, when it comes to drawing, the challenge is that for a lot of artists, it's hard to just start with a hand. Again, apologies for the horrible character work. It's camera work, I meant to say. Apologies for the horrible camera work. It's very hard to start with a hand and then draw, down to the arm, down to the shoulder, down to the head, and the face. And what happens is you tend to either everything gets progressively smaller or everything gets progressively bigger, but the figure is out of proportion. For artists, you tend to start with, all right, what is my proportion? How big is the entire figure going to be? And then once you know how big the figure is going to be, all right, if the figure is that tall, you know that the bottom half, the bottom of the torso is at the halfway point. And then you'll have legs below. I'm intentionally putting them in different positions. And, you'll have torso above. You know about how big the head should be. You know that the average for a athletic figure is about 8 heads tall. The average human is really 7.5 heads. A superheroic figure will be 9 heads tall. But you kind of, as an artist, you work out how your pose is going to be and your proportion. And then when you do that, you work out your pose and your proportion, and then you start building in the anatomy. So, you start with a gesture, just what the pose is. You fix all of that. Now, you can see how just at this stage, working out what are the major beats of this before I even decide, is this character Batman? Is he Superman? Is it a she? Is it Wonder Woman? And you're going to add a lasso. Before you work out all of the actual details of the drawing, just by starting with this, if you apply that to writing, that's what outlining is, And while I appreciate the idea of the need for discovery, the need to find interest and mystery and to surprise yourself in the story, the way that my brain makes pictures is kind of the same way that I construct stories. So it's sort of like, for me personally, it's like I need to understand where everything's going to go before I start making things look pretty. So anyway, that's sort of that's my approach towards it. And I always tell people, it's not that I think that outlining is better than discovery writing, because I love Stephen King, and Stephen King is a discovery writer. There's tons of writers that love their discovery writers. For me, it is more a factor of, I've tried to just start with chapter 1 of a story, then write it, draw it, then go to chapter 2, write it, draw it. And inevitably, I always get to a point where I'm like, wow, I need to start over because I don't know where I'm going. Who knows? Maybe it'll take years of me being a really good, not years, but years of refining my craft at writing and storytelling with outlines to the point where I will be so good at my craft that I can write my way through any scene and write my way out of any problem, no matter what scenario I start with. And once I get that good at writing, then I can start, writing things without knowing where I'm going. So we'll see. Arrowset says, have you ever read the book Story Genius? It's my Bible for writing a good story. It's about outlining, but with the right info, not just finagling and fluffing. Let's see. Well, you know what? I have not, but I'm going to write that down. Story Genius. All right. I will look that book up. Thank you for the recommendation. I'm always looking for good books on craft because, much like art books, I'm always trying to learn and grow and learn different things. And Arrowset also says, I recently learned in that Stan Lee book, the heroic 8 heads tall versus regular Joe looks 6 heads tall. And the book How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way, most of it is illustrated by John Buscema. And I definitely feel like that is it's a book that I read when I was in high school, and I thought that I knew everything that was in there. So I actually ended up not keeping the book. And now years later, I come back and I realize, just because it's a simple idea, it does not mean that it is easy to do. In fact, the simpler something is, the harder it is to do. So that is a book that I feel like that covers all the fundamentals of visual storytelling with comics. And if every comic book just did what's in that book, then every comic book would be a masterpiece. But John Buscema makes everything, all of the difficult, challenging things that go into the craft of making comics, he makes them look easy. But yeah, that is a great book. It's an amazing reference book. And I'm glad you've got it. You've got some good stuff on your hands. Let's see here. Amar in the chat. How you doing, man? Says, same. I remember it from either high school, from grammar or high school. I presume you mean the How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way. So I'm just going through here, and I'm close, but I'm not quite there with the storm. I really like this thumbnail. I just feel like there's something about her pose that isn't quite doing it for me. Like, I haven't even put any facial features in there. That dot just represents the shadow on the underside of the nose. But there's something about, like, maybe I just need to tilt her head towards the camera or away from the camera a little bit. But there's something that she needs, just a little something, and I haven't found what that something else is yet. Let's see here. Go back here and take another try. Oh, this silly clamp. I gotta get a portable drawing stand, or a portable camera stand for my phone. Let's see here. The nice thing about having my camera on here is that I can actually, by holding it, now that I'm holding it, I can actually move it around. I can hear my cat, Khaleesi. She's sitting in a pet bed next to me. And I can hear her just wheezing and snoring. She usually is always at my side as I work. Let's see here. So let's see what happens if I just tilt her head away a little bit more. In fact, I'm going to put this head. I've got a whole video called Drawing a Head in a Box. It's an older video, but it's one just about the idea that not just heads, but pretty much anything you draw, if you just simplify it to a cube, you can help understand where it exists in space. So the idea of just drawing her head tilted, and this is probably more dramatic than it needs to be. But then once I've got it like this, then I can, carve away. Well, before I start putting in the masses of the skull, I do want to come down here and just sort of define what I'm doing with her hair in big chunks. I don't want to get into curls. Don't want to get into little details of the hair. I want to keep it down to big chunky masses. Almost as if you were looking at something in Photoshop and you were to just posterize everything so that all you saw were just big, flat, two-dimensional shapes. Let's see here. And then from here, I can carve out a little bit of the underside of her jaw. just switch over a little bit so I can look at the reference that I have here. And it's interesting how different artists draw her headdress. Maybe that's really what I'm struggling with here is I'm trying to copy other artists' version of Storm's headdress when what I need to do instead is genuinely just come up with or invent my own. Because when I look at the reference that I have up, the cockrum headdress, and again, only having one page in here, not having multiple pages, the cockrum headdress has more of a straight top. These fins that come down on the side, a loop on top, and then it has the actual part that frames her face. Whereas the Arthur Adams classic X-Men cover that I'm looking at, these little fins that are there, the shape of the whole thing tends to be more the framing of her face, that element is more pronounced. And then the fins that come out are more curved and sort of following. They're more up and on the upper sides as opposed to coming just out and down. And then they angle back. There's a lot more curvature to them. They angle back in and they frame the loop on her head. So both of these, I definitely think the Art Adams one is more attractive. But let's say I was going to do like 5 sketch covers of Storm. It would change every single time because I haven't really made her headdress my own. So I kind of want to do some doodles just based on, even though the Art Adams one is the one that feels more attractive to me, I kind of want to draw it a bunch of times until the same way that you could draw the bat symbol, like figuring out a way to shape this into something that really reads in kind of my own personal shape language, just the way that I sketch things out, finding a way to make this element of the costume my own so I can draw it quickly. Let's see here. In the chat, Araset asked Amar, do you make comics? And Amar said, I would say yes and no, because I made one online webcomic, then I went into limbo, still have others, 15 issues to finish writing. Let's see here. I have finished writing 2, maybe 3 other issues and almost completed storyboarding the other. Damn, you are making some progress. I'm glad to hear it. Amar said about Khaleesi, said, she's your shadow. It sounds like she's acknowledging you in her sleep. Yeah, she always, anytime I draw, it's funny. She was in the living room with my wife. And when I said, you know what, I wasn't sure if I was going to live stream today, but I said, you know what, let me go in there and just get on the board for a little while. And as soon as Khaleesi heard that I was getting up and going into my drawing area, and she got up like, oh, it's time to draw, coming with you. Whether oftentimes she does sleep while I'm drawing, but she always likes to be in the room while I'm doing creative stuff. This is here. Amar says, that's what I would do. Do what you feel she would have as a crown that matches your style. Yes, that's exactly what I'm going for. So I want to take the Art Adams style and really make it my own. Let's see here. Amar says, I think if you draw from memory, you can be more loose than come back and look at reference and put her back more on character. I think that's the reason why I'm looking at reference now is because the very first time I started sketching her out, I actually drew the fins that are on her headdress. I actually drew them pointing up, so it looked more like Galactus costume. And I was just like, oh, wow, that is so off. And what I had in my memory is so far from because Storm hasn't worn that headdress in ages. She's gone through many, many different hairstyles. And I kind of originally, I was going to just start doing with the punk Storm. But I thought, let me go back and start with the Cockrum one. Let's see here. Arrowset says, what about popping your phone on top of a bottle or a book so you don't have to hold it? Well, see, that is a great idea. The problem is my drawing table that I'm working on right now is, let me see if I can get back enough to see it. The point is it's a drafting table, so it is at an angle. As opposed to being able to sit it on top of a bottle and have it like hang over and look down, because this surface is angled, anything I put it on, it's going to slide right off. And I was trying with these clamps before I started the stream. I was like desperately like, what can I clip this to hold it in position? But I can't find anything that I can properly attach the phone to and have it pointing at the sketchbook and have it facing the right angle. So I'm going to work on resolving that. If I'm able to stream next week, hopefully it'll be a little bit better. But I'm going to find something. But as for this, like I was just like, yeah, I kept looking, kept trying, couldn't find anything that would really work. And I know it does suck to be watching shaky cam artwork being made, and I feel awful for making you guys suffer through that. But I appreciate you sticking with me through it. And hey, Dylan is in the chat. Good to see you, Dylan. Amar said, I think I would have sketched out the mohawk or long-haired version from memory, then added a tiara similar to Wonder Woman's from memory. Yeah, I mean, all of those are valid approaches. Let me just see if I would just do a simple, and this is where we get into the thumbnailing thing, is that this is just like, I don't look at this as a single sketch card. I do all of these doodles, and then I'll go back and in the process of doing the doodles, I'll look at the different versions I did that weren't working, and I'll try to do finished versions that maybe fix some of the issues. Like, this thing is not full of sketch cards, but I mean, it's full of sketch cards, but not all of them have stuff drawn on them yet. But for instance, let me just sit this down here so I don't spill these. Oh, one of them already tried to take off. Like I was doing some Batgirl, and there's another Batgirl in here that's almost the same pose, but I just wasn't happy with it. Let's see, some Batgirl, some Batman. Oh, hang on, I gotta sit the phone down for a minute while I take all these out. But just the idea of, Wonder Woman, a couple of different faces. I'm not really happy with either of these faces, but the same way that I'll do a bunch of thumbnails, I'll go through and I'll do multiple finished versions trying to figure out what's wrong. What happens if I try drawing her hair differently? What happens if I try drawing her tiara differently? What happens if and I will tell you, for all of these, it's less about the character design and it's more about the fundamental shape of her skull. I just didn't do a good job of building her head well. And that's from just being out of practice with going to figure drawing class on a weekly basis. Normally, I go to figure drawing class every week and work from live models, both male and female. And what that does for me is it trains my body to it trains my eye and my hand to construct forms in 2 dimensions that feel like 3-dimensional volumes, that really do feel like the way that a human skull or a human body is put together. And these feel like they're a little bit more flat and a little bit more like concepts, ideas of the figure, as opposed to real accurate figures. What else is in here? I'm gonna have to figure out where my other sketches are, because this bin did have a bunch of sketch cards in there, and I'm not sure where the other ones are right now. So, but anyway, back to this. In the same way that I would do multiples of that, of the finished pieces, I'm looking at a way to really make it where I can do multiple thumbnails of an idea. So that's the thing. I started by saying that the Art Adams one is more attractive, but because I tend to block things in angular shapes, this feels more like this feels like a hodgepodge of or a mashup of the Art Adams version and the Dave Cockrum version. And now the fact that this is sticking out so far, it feels a little bit more insect shaped, which feels weird. So these are all just things where, oh, if I were just doodling and not trying to make a finished drawing, it would have all these weird proportional things that are off. And it's a matter of getting it into something where it feels like the character, but it also feels like something that I could dash off quickly without overthinking. And also deciding how far down I want these the side pieces to come in terms of framing her cheeks. If I go and I look at my reference, like for instance, on the Art Adams one, it really goes down past her nose, like looking at how far down her face, the framing element, it's almost like to the top of her lips. Whereas if I go back to the Cockrum one, well, no, the Cockrum one goes down pretty far too. So maybe that's also part of it. It's just changing the size of how I frame her head. But yeah, it's at this point, it's just a matter of just doing some doodles and sketching it until I get it to something that I'm comfortable with. And it seems like a lot of work to go through for a sketch card. But my idea is that I do this enough that no matter what the character is, I can knock out these small pieces that feel very, very finished, even if they're small. And all of this comes to a conversation I've had with another friend of mine, a comic book professional named Carl Altstetter. We've been buddies for a long time. He's definitely a mentor to me. Stubbornly, even though I fight his advice a lot of times, he still continues to give it. So I have to thank him for not giving up on me. But he said that I was spending too long making finished pieces, and he's absolutely right about that. And he was the one who suggested, try just making sketch cards, making finished pieces that are small, little, so I can have little wins. And I started by just making the ones you saw there, like those Wonder Woman ones that I wasn't happy with. And I realized, okay, even for making something like sketch cards, I need to get myself to a place where those pieces feel, they just need to have the quality that I want my finished work to have. And that's something that requires some more attention. It requires some more, me to strive a bit more. Let's see here. HJ says, I've been slacking on art and comics lately, focusing on filmmaking shorts for a while, trying to reboot all my old comic book characters in the background, though. And then right after that, Dylan says, LOL, fighting against his advice. Yeah. Unfortunately, acknowledging that you are a stubborn person doesn't make the stubbornness go away. It's more like Superman knows that kryptonite can kill him, doesn't, stop him from running across kryptonite. So lots of people give me great advice. And what I've learned now is, first off, even if it goes counter to my knowledge, I tend to just say thank you no matter what. But a lot of times people will give me knowledge and I know that they're right, but it's getting myself to a place where I can enact that advice because all of my instincts are fighting against it. And that's really hard when you are battling yourself or you're your own worst enemy. You're standing in your own way. That really is something that's hard to fight. But I think that pushing forward, pushing against those things, pushing against the ways in which we hold ourselves back, that's how we grow. You have to push through your bad habits because the bad habits aren't going to go away. They're just going to sit there waiting for you. And the minute you slip up, they're going to jump on your ass. And so you just have to say, all right, every day I get up, I got to fight this bad habit. You got to wrestle it to the ground, try to do the things that are harder for you. And then eventually they become easier and easier. And if you're really, really lucky and you're really, really persistent, then someday those bad habits, you will adopt the good habits and replace the bad habits with them. But it doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't necessarily happen in a month, even though people claim it takes 30 days to build new habits. For me, the act of replacing my bad habits with good ones is a lifetime battle. But it's a lifetime battle that I'm like, what else am I going to do? I could just say, oh, it's too hard, I'm going to give up. I'm like, all right, well, then I'm just never going to be as good of an artist and writer as I want. I just have to live with that. As long as I'm going to live a life with somebody who's trying to make things, why not continue to push? Why not try to get better? Now, it would be different if I was being rewarded financially, like people were throwing money at me for making like shitty comics. That would be a very different story. But as it stands now, that isn't happening. So I'm just got to keep trying to get better. So we're getting down to about an hour here. So if anybody has any other questions before we wrap up, feel free to throw them in the chat. Otherwise, I'll get through the last few comments here and we're going to call it a day. Before I read those comments, I am going to flip back to the reference and show you the other thing that I'm looking at now is not just how far down her headdress goes to like where it lines up with her facial features. Like I said, with this one, it's going below the nose, but also looking at, well, where does the point, when it angles out and then come back in, that point lines up with the top of her eyes. So now I'm trying to use the headdress itself as geographical landmarks for her facial features. And then going up even higher and looking at the fin that's off to the side, like where does that start? That seems to line up. It is a little bit above her widow's peak, which is interesting just in the fact that not a lot of Black people tend to have widow's peaks, but having it lining up just up there, and the rest of the elements are above her facial features. But really, it was looking at where does the bottom of the fin line up? Where does the corner of the actual part that frames her face, where does that line up? And then where does the bottom of the mouth line up? And these are all things that just in terms of drawing in my sketchbook, I can look at let's just say I go back to the simple like sphere, egg shape for the head. And I say, all right, well, let's say that's her brow line. I can also say that that's where I'm going to put the point of her headdress. Let's say halfway down, I put her nose. And even though the headdress goes down lower than her nose, well, actually, you know what? Let's just try it and see how it goes. Because I was thinking I could use her nose as the landmark simply because it's easier visually. But instead, let's say if her mouth is in between, let's just a little dash mark for where her mouth is on the outside. And then it's just a matter of connecting the dots. Then halfway up her head, that's where I'll put that ring. So on the outside, it can be angular, and then on the inside, I can curve. And then again, going just a little bit up. So at this stage, what it really is about playing a game of connect the dots and figuring out where I want to place the dots so that these framing elements give me the shape and form that I want. And again, I think that these fins and the headdress, the way I'm drawing it right now, is a little too chunky. So I need to slim it down. But another thing is that I know it sounds stupid, but the fact that I'm drawing with one hand, when I draw two-handed, I will shift the sketchbook around so that I'm rotating it as I draw to give me better control over the curves and arcs. And it just gives me a little bit more stability when I'm not using, one hand to hold this thing. So again, hopefully future live streams, I'll work out this stand issue because I don't know how soon I'll be able to get back to my normal studio setup where I've got my my GoPro like camera. But I will say that just this little element, this exercise in breaking Storm's costume, her headdress and costume down into primitive features, this helps me. Being able to take the organic, turning it into primitive geometric forms so that I can move them around, turn them, look at them in different angles, and then after that, to be able to redraw them back into the organic forms, to take these geometric primitives that I've moved, angled, shaped, looked at different angles, and then redraw them now back as the organic, to return them to their natural state of, oh, this is a character. It's a character we love. It's got their personality to them. They've got flow and figure and gesture. That ability to do that is, I think, essential to comic storytelling because you have to draw characters from so many different angles, much like animators do. And for some people, it is a natural gift. I'm not one of those people, but it is something that if you study and work at it, you can eventually develop. Okay, so last couple of comments here, and we're going to wrap it up. And I see my boy Paul Pate in the chat. Hey, Paul. Paul says, hey, y'all. Good to see you as always. Another fellow great comic creator, storybook artist, creative raconteur extraordinaire. Let's see here. All right, going back to, so this is where I left off in the comments. Dylan said, correct, knowing that you're stubborn does not help you become less stubborn. Same. Dylan says, I feel forming healthier habits from an old bad habit is harder than forming a brand new habit that isn't connected to an old bad habit. Yeah, very true. Because forming a new good habit is simply the act of saying, I'm just going to start doing these things. Whereas when you're fighting the inertia of the old bad habit, that's, you're battling, you're deprogramming yourself, and that's hard. Paul says, pencil and paper looks nice. Yeah, I'm going to try and get back to more traditional work here. And I mean, to be honest, this is making me regret the idea of wanting to do my next comic digitally. I may renege on that and go back to doing pencil and paper for the next one. And Araset also greeting new people, new folks joining the stream. Paul, Dylan. Let's see here. Araset says, doing good, Paul. Just started my day here. So my first cup of tea. I had my first cup of coffee right before this stream, and I'm already ready to go back to bed. I probably should get another cup before I move on to the rest of the stuff I have to do. Paul says the mouse pointer looks like debris on my iPad. I tried to brush it off a couple of times. That's the weird thing is sometimes it duplicates. This is the thing I don't understand. Sometimes when I'm using the mouse, it does not show up on the screen. And sometimes I use it and it does. But that's why a lot of the times I try to remember and just move well, here's the thing. When I move my mouse over here, for you guys, you can still see it. For me, it's like over where the chat is now. So for me, it's not bothering me, but maybe it's better to just move it. I'm afraid to move it up to the top because there I could accidentally click on something and pop out of the stream. But it's nice to find someplace to sort of rest the cursor so it's out of the way and it doesn't bother anybody. All right, guys. Anyway, on this note, so you know what? Did like a couple of pages of just thumbnails, just character thumbnails. It's not the be all end all. I didn't get around to actually drawing a true sketch card. I think that if I had a thumbnail that I was like, this is the one to rule them all, then I probably could finish one sketch card in a single live stream session. But, like I said, my sketchbook is a place of exploration and process and work. It's not a place for me making pretty pictures. So most of what's in here is me doing what I did with you today. It's just working things out and trying to figure stuff out. Dylan says, Paul, I thought Jeremy had a piece of dirt on his camera, was going to comment that he had something on his lens. Yeah, I'll have to find a good place to. I wish actually that the cursor, instead of being this cursor, would stay like oh yeah, when I put it over the chat, it turns into the little hand. See, like now it's the little weird, it's the little pointer. Now it's the hand. Maybe if it was like that, if I left it over the chat the whole time, you guys would at least be like, oh, okay, he's got the chat thing going on. Well, actually, this is interesting. If I put it down past the chat off to the bottom, it kind of disappears. All right, none of that really matters. Point is, well, hey, Araset says, was great to catch you live. The delayed start is good since any earlier and I'd still be sleeping. Well, I'm glad you're able to catch us live here, catch me live. I appreciate you watching. Hopefully, any of the times when I'm running long and I'm going late, you'll be able to catch it. But otherwise, please, any of the videos, if you see something that catches your eye, leave a comment because I'll either comment on it on that directly on that video, or I'll bring it up in the following live stream. And again, I wanted to get on here because I'm not sure if I will be able to live stream next week. And I think for this entire month, it's going to be very catch as catch can. So if I don't see you next week, then I'll see you the week after that. And then the last weekend of March, I'm going to be at WonderCon in Anaheim, California. So I won't be, maybe I'll do like a little morning live stream before I start just to say hi to everybody. Anyway, thank you everybody for all the great comments and conversation during the stream. Appreciate it. If you enjoy these live streams, I'd like to get additional bonus live streams twice a month. You can become a Patreon subscriber for as little as $2 a month. head on over to patreon.com/Jeremy. It's patreon.com/GERIMI. If you'd like to get a free digital sketchbook, work in progress animated GIFs delivered right to your inbox, blog posts about what I'm reading, what I'm watching, what's inspiring me creatively, you can sign up for my free monthly newsletter at substack.com/@Jeremy. And if you'd like to purchase physical copies of my comic books or free digitally on Kindle, you can go to amazon.jeremy.net. They'll forward you to my Amazon author page. All right, guys, thank you so much. I appreciate you hanging out. That's it for now. Go be creative.